Have you ever wondered why people only seem to respect you once you've withdrawn? Why they ignore your kindness, but tremble at your indifference? Today, we're going to expose a hidden law of human nature, why your silence disturbs them more than your words ever could. There is a strange, unsettling truth buried deep in the mechanics of human behavior. People often value what they can no longer have. Attention is cheap when it's constant, and care is ignored when it flows too freely. The moment you step back, the illusion they've built around their own importance begins to unravel. Withdrawal, when done not out of weakness but out of cold calculation, is the first step in rebalancing power. In every social dynamic, visible effort creates an invisible hierarchy. The more you lean forward, the more they lean back. The more you chase, the more they retreat. Not because they are worth chasing, but because power despises desperation. When you are readily available, your presence becomes expected. It loses its weight. They stop listening, they stop respecting, and eventually, they stop fearing the loss of you. That is when they start to play games. And yet, the moment you remove yourself, not angrily, not bitterly, but with an eerie calm, they begin to panic. Not because they miss you, but because your absence challenges their illusion of control. This is the power in withdrawal. You force others to reckon with a version of you they cannot access, cannot manipulate, and cannot predict. It's no longer about words, it's about silence. Silence, when used strategically, is louder than explanation. People become unsettled not because you shouted, but because you stopped speaking. They find themselves wondering, why did he disappear? Did I go too far? What is he thinking now? The uncertainty disturbs them. The game was fun when they felt in control, when your reactions were predictable. But now, the rules have changed. They are no longer the player. They've become the subject of your absence. Withdrawal isn't a retreat. It's an act of assertion. It says, I no longer accept this dynamic. The beauty of this method lies in its simplicity. You do not need to argue, cry, or plead. You simply stop. You detach. And in that detachment, you signal something far more powerful than any confrontation ever could, that your value does not rely on their recognition, that your presence is a choice, not a given. There is also a deeper psychological shift that takes place when you withdraw. You no longer see them through the lens of your need or affection. You see them as they are, unembellished, unmasked, and often unimpressive. This shift makes your decision even more threatening to them, because now they know you see clearly, and you still walked away. You didn't leave because you were emotional. You left because you saw no more benefit in staying. That kind of rejection is a blow to the ego they cannot easily recover from. In withdrawing, you become an enigma. You become the one who doesn't need constant validation, who isn't swayed by approval or attention. You exit the theater, leaving them on stage with no audience. And without an audience, their performance collapses. What they mistook for control was only sustained by your participation. Once you stop playing, their power dissolves. True strength doesn't lie in shouting louder. It lies in mastering the art of disappearance. To be seen as indifferent is to be seen as dangerous. And when you become dangerous, people begin to think twice before treating you carelessly. Human beings are not as rational as they claim to be. What they truly desire is rarely what is most useful, most kind, or most available. They desire what they believe is rare. Not because it is rare in essence, but because they perceive it to be beyond their reach. This is the foundation of value in every kingdom, market, and relationship scarcity. The more inaccessible something becomes, the more the imagination begins to inflate its worth. And when it comes to people, the same law applies. Those who make themselves scarce are the ones who rule attention, respect, and fear. When you are always around, always answering, always available, always attentive, you create a dangerous illusion. You tell them, you can have me whenever you want. That illusion breeds entitlement. What was once a gift becomes an expectation, and what was once a mystery becomes mundane. Your presence is no longer a delight, but a background noise in their world. They stop looking for you, because they assume you will always be there. You've erased the hunger, and with it, the power. Now, contrast that with scarcity. Imagine disappearing for a time, not with drama, but with deliberate silence. You no longer respond immediately. You no longer explain your every move. You become hard to reach, harder to read. This disruption alone shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, they begin to think. They begin to wonder. Your absence creates space, and in that space, they begin to reconstruct your value. Their mind races to fill in the gaps, and every unanswered question becomes a seed of obsession. Where did they go? Did I lose them? Were they more important than I thought? They begin to assign importance to you, not because you did more, but because you gave them less. The scarcity effect is not about manipulation. It is about resetting the scale of worth. People only assign value in proportion to what they must give up to attain something. A man who gives his time freely is often overlooked, while the one who gives nothing commands curiosity. Your availability is a currency. Spend it too freely, and you go bankrupt in the economy of attention. But hold it back, and its worth compounds. You are no longer one of many. You become the one who cannot be summoned, only noticed when absent. In ancient courts and modern friendships alike, the powerful understood this instinctively. The sovereign rarely walks among the common. The prized artifact is kept behind glass, not because the item itself is beyond comprehension, but because the perception of difficulty to access it raises its prestige. So when you step back, when you stop showing up with the same eagerness, you begin to cloak yourself in scarcity. And with that cloak, people begin to project value onto you that you no longer need to perform for. They fill the silence with their own insecurities, questions, and longings. The less they see you, the more they start to imagine who you really are. This transformation is not just social, it is psychological. Scarcity triggers fear of loss. It presses on the most primitive part of the human mind that dreads being left behind, excluded, or forgotten. When you were always around, they felt no urgency. Now, they feel time slipping. They worry someone else has your attention. They begin to remember things they dismissed. Your silence becomes an amplifier for their regret, their ego, their unspoken attachment, and what they once took for granted becomes sacred. In the art of scarcity, timing is crucial. Vanish too soon, and you may be forgotten. Vanish too late, and you may be discarded. But vanish with precision when your presence has reached its saturation point. Then you trigger the shift. A person who is hard to access becomes one whose attention is earned, not assumed. And when people have to earn you, they never forget you. In every relationship, there exists an invisible scale. On one side, power, on the other, emotion. Most people tip the balance without realizing it. They hand over control not through contracts or declarations, but through their feelings. Carrying too much, too openly, too recklessly creates an emotional imbalance that sharp minds immediately recognize and exploit. This is not about cruelty. It is about power dynamics. The one who feels more, who needs more, who reacts more, is always at a disadvantage. The more you care, the more power you give away. The less you care, the more power you quietly gather. To care is human, but to care blindly is fatal in a world where perception shapes treatment. When you show too much emotional investment, you signal vulnerability. You are saying, without words, you matter more to me than I matter to myself. That admission might feel noble in the realm of poetry, but in human interactions, it exposes your pressure points. It tells them where to press when they need you to bend. Your attention becomes a leash, your concern a chain. And before long, you find yourself dancing to the tune of someone who once had no control over you at all. Emotional leverage is the tool by which people manipulate those who haven't mastered detachment. If they know you'll always respond when they're cold, always explain when they're silent, always chase when they pull away, then they own you without ever having to declare it. They don't have to give you anything. Not respect, not clarity, not presence, because they know you'll show up regardless. You become predictable, and what is predictable is easy to control. Now consider the inverse. The moment you begin to pull back, not with anger, but with intention, you remove their primary source of power, your reaction. Suddenly, the silence they once used as a weapon no longer works. The guilt they relied on to summon your attention fades into irrelevance. You don't explain, You don't argue. You don't seek closure. You've stepped out of the emotional theater, and now they are left with no audience. And the ones who play games always panic when the game ends without warning. Detachment, then, becomes the most dangerous form of emotional control. It is not apathy, it is composure. You still feel, but you are no longer enslaved by those feelings. You no longer act on every impulse, or try to fix every misunderstanding. You let others sit in the discomfort of their own behavior. You no longer carry the burden of both your emotions and theirs. This disturbs people. It frustrates them, because when they cannot manipulate your heart, they realize they never had you, only your reactions. The paradox is that once you stop caring as much, the very people who took your emotions for granted start to care more. They sense the shift in energy, and it unnerves them. You are no longer the reliable source of comfort, praise, or forgiveness. Your absence of emotion forces them to confront the reality that you are no longer operating from a place of emotional dependence. They begin to chase what they once repelled. Not because they love you, but because they lost their ability to control you. Power returns to you the moment you stop handing out your emotional energy like charity. You no longer argue to be understood. You no longer prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. You no longer tolerate one-sided games that reward silence and punish effort. The balance shifts, not because you raised your voice, but because you lowered your investment. And in doing so, you dismantle the entire mechanism they used to dominate the emotional battlefield. People are not addicted to your presence. They are addicted to the control they believe they have over it. The illusion is always this: that you will stay, that you will return, that no matter how they act, you will remain predictable, available, and emotionally invested. This illusion becomes the foundation of their confidence, their nonchalance, even their cruelty. They do not fear losing you, not because they don't need you, but because they have convinced themselves that you will never leave. It is not your absence they underestimate, but your capacity to disappear without permission, without a scene, without giving them the final word. But when you finally step away, when you detach not to punish but to preserve yourself, a crack forms in the illusion. At first, it appears small. They assume you are just being dramatic, that you'll return with time, that your silence is temporary. But when the silence continues, when the distance stretches, they begin to realize something terrifying. They are no longer in control of your behavior. The image they held of you, a person who would always reach out, always seek peace, always try to explain, is now dissolving. They're no longer dealing with the version of you they had imagined. That version is gone. This moment, when their illusion begins to collapse, is not emotional for them. It is existential. People who rely on power over others must maintain illusions to survive. They depend on your fear, your longing, your reactions to sustain their sense of superiority. They do not know how to function when that framework is removed. So when you remove yourself, you do more than just walk away. You dismantle their theater. You turn the lights on in a performance hall built entirely on your participation. Without you, the show ends, and they are forced to sit with themselves, unadorned, unentertained, and exposed. The shattered illusion is not only about your withdrawal, it's about what it reveals. Your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects how much of their identity was constructed around your emotional labor. They see themselves now as they truly are: fragile, insecure, dependent. And this is a truth they've spent years avoiding. It is easy to feel powerful when someone else is always there to fix, to explain, to sacrifice. It is much harder to feel that power when no one is responding, when no one is validating, when no one is absorbing the emotional consequences of your actions. That is what your silence does. It doesn't just disturb, it exposes. What unsettles them is not just the loss of you, but the loss of the version of themselves that only existed because of you. The confident, cold, manipulative mask begins to fall, and beneath it, they find uncertainty. They find weakness. They find that they were never as powerful as they pretended to be. They were simply feeding off your energy, your attention, your need to make things right. Without that, they are left to confront their own emptiness. This is the unseen power of detachment. It is not dramatic. It is not chaotic. It is surgical. It slices through the fantasies they had about you and about themselves. They begin to see the depth of what they mistreated, ignored, or dismissed. They replay old conversations and realize how patient you were. They recall your efforts and now see them not as desperate, but as rare. And because illusions are fragile, the moment they break, reality rushes in with all its weight. That weight crushes the lies they told themselves. Lies like, "You'll never leave," or "You'll always care," or "You need them more than they need you." In this moment of collapse, people often scramble. They may reach out. They may attempt to provoke you back into your old role. They may say just enough to test whether the illusion can be repaired, but the damage is done. They have seen what life looks like without your energy sustaining their illusion. And that image, once seen, cannot be unseen. The deepest fear in the human psyche is not death, it is irrelevance. To be forgotten, overlooked, or replaced is a quiet annihilation of identity. People may not say this aloud, but every action that seeks attention, every performance for validation, every carefully curated image is a defense against this fear. In a world addicted to being seen, to not be noticed is to cease existing. And so, when you stop caring, when you remove your attention, your energy, your presence, you do more than leave a room. You threaten their existence in it. Relevance is not just about popularity or fame. It is about significance in someone else's mind. People are not afraid of you leaving because they love you unconditionally. They are afraid that in your absence, they will no longer matter. Your silence is not just a missing sound. It is a reminder that their grip on your mind has slipped. This, more than anything, causes panic. The idea that you could live, thrive, or even grow without them destroys the quiet fantasy they built, that they were essential to your world. For as long as you are emotionally engaged, they are safe. Your reactions, even your anger, reassure them that they matter. As long as you are triggered, they are relevant. You may think your confrontations are strong acts of resistance, but to them, they are evidence of your continued investment. Your tears, your frustration, your endless need to explain, it all feeds the illusion that they are irreplaceable in your inner world. It confirms that they still hold space in your heart and mind. But when that energy vanishes, when they provoke, and you no longer flinch, they are forced to confront a terrifying possibility. They have become background noise. This is where the panic sets in. At first, they may mask it with arrogance. They may pretend your detachment is meaningless. But internally, a storm begins. If they no longer occupy your attention, they are no longer relevant in the only battlefield that matters, the psychological. Relevance isn't just about presence. It is about impact. And when your absence no longer disturbs you, their impact fades. They are left speaking into a void, where once your emotions echoed back to them. They reach for you in subtle ways, through silence, delayed replies, or sudden friendliness, hoping to reignite even a spark of emotion. Not because they miss you, but because they miss the feeling of mattering. There is something brutal about becoming irrelevant to someone who once clung to your attention. It forces them to recognize their own replaceability. It shatters the myth that they were unique, irreplaceable, or necessary in your story. And in this recognition, they are stripped bare. They begin comparing, competing, imagining who has taken their place. They may scroll through your silence, trying to find clues, desperately seeking signs that you still think of them. But your indifference becomes a locked door, and every knock that goes unanswered pushes them deeper into despair. This fear drives much of human behavior, though most will never admit it. They would rather be hated than forgotten. They will provoke you, betray you, manipulate you, just to maintain a foothold in your consciousness. Even if they cannot be loved, they will settle for being feared or resented. Because all of these still mean they matter, but once you become emotionally indifferent, you erase their name from your internal ledger. You free yourself, and in doing so, you condemn them to the one state they cannot endure: insignificance. To lose relevance is to be exiled from someone's emotional world. An emotional exile is the most effective, most lasting punishment, not by inflicting pain, but by becoming unreachable. Not through rage, but through silence. When they see that your life moves forward without the need for their presence, they feel the hollowness of their own. They realize that what they took for granted was never guaranteed, and what they now desire most, a reaction, a word, a sign of importance, is the one thing they can no longer compel. You were never weak for caring. You were simply unaware of how much power you were giving away in the name of connection. They mistook your kindness for dependence, your patience for weakness, your consistency for desperation. But when you stopped caring, not with bitterness, but with clarity, they panicked, because what they feared most was never your anger, but your indifference. Your silence spoke louder than every conversation they avoided. Your absence revealed a truth they had long buried. You were the one holding everything together. And now you've let go. This is not revenge. This is the restoration of balance. When you remove your energy from those who misuse it, they are left with the weight of their own actions. No explanations, no warnings, just a cold and quiet recalibration of power. And in that silence, they are forced to reckon with what they've lost. Not just access to you, but access to the version of themselves that only existed because you tolerated them. When you stop caring, you don't become cruel. You become free. You become unpredictable, untouchable, unforgettable. You move from being controlled to being in control. And those who once held sway over your emotions are left in the shadows, clawing at memories, haunted by the echo of a presence they thought would never leave. So let them panic. Let them feel the void they created. You owe them nothing, not closure, not comfort, not a single trace of who you used to be. What you owe is only to yourself, the peace that comes from detachment, the dignity that comes from silence, and the quiet triumph of no longer being someone they can command through care.